Whoops.
Awesome. Okay. Sarah Jones, and I am on the board of Pacheco, Colorado, and I am also on the board of the Broward County Wildfire Mitigation Council. And so whenever I love in the Greater Colorado meetings, kind of bringing different perspectives, because there's a lot of times where this work overlaps, and working in different spaces, it's hard to know what else is going on and where there are opportunities and hurdles in this space. So that's me. Scott, do you want to introduce yourself? And I'll get the slide deck.
Sure. Thanks, Sarah. Scott Kelman, Rock County Environmental Health. Also, in the waste sector group of our Climate Action Collaborative, and always looking for opportunities and solutions to help with waste diversion here in Rock County.
Awesome. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and get it on slideshow. So, and I'll try very hard not to use acronyms or to define them, because of course, just like the waste space, the wildfire space has lots of acronyms too. But today, kind of giving a very high level overview of the Colorado Wildfire Resiliency Code, and then kind of starting the discussion of where we see possible waste stream implications, to then go into the discussion of what are opportunities to divert those waste streams. Okay. So first, just a very high level overview. I know just enough to get me into trouble, so I'm starting with that. I will give you an overview if anybody has questions. Each municipality or jurisdiction has adopted these codes. They had to by April 1, so feel free to reach out, and I've got some resources at the end of the slide, or you can email me or send me a chat, and I will help to direct you to someone who really knows what's going on in this space. But before the code, there was this establishment of the Wildfire Resiliency Code Board. So, and they are underneath the Colorado Fire Prevention and Control, so DFPC, which does work throughout Colorado on wildfire prevention and reduction and control. So, the board was established by the Senate Bill 23, and with the mission of creating this new code. So the code introduces a mandatory minimum construction landscaping standards, specifically for what we call WUI, that's the wildland urban interface. But you'll see, of course, across Colorado, there are different levels of risk. And so they've taken that into consideration, and I'll go into that next. But I just want to put this up here, and I know there's several people on this call who could speak about wildfire risk and how scary that is we think about coming into this summer. So just wanted to put this up quickly, like wildfire risk is no joke. And I know Rachel could speak to that in depth, but this is just what we're seeing for this summer. And it's scary. Hopefully we've all gotten quite a bit of precipitation, but we know that it's a risk. And this is not just this season. We know that with climate change, this has been happening over many years. And we're seeing changes not only in drought conditions, but in vegetation, lots of things that the weather pattern changes, vegetation pattern changes that really increase this wildfire risk. And we know that there is no wildfire season anymore. So the codes are really important to help protect all of us in Colorado throughout the year against wildfire risk. Now, of course, it is only for new and remodeled buildings, but it's a start. So here's some key deadlines and code review. So everyone had to adopt this by April 1st. I don't think there were any waivers, but I could be wrong on that. And then enforcement begins on July 1st. So any permit or plans that were put before July 1st do not have to comply. Anything after do. And what makes this code a little tricky is this is not just the building department who reviews and enforces. So there's the building department, but there's also planning. So that could be whether that's county or city planning, and then also fire departments. So they have to do a lot of work. And why this took quite a bit of time to get in place it requires a lot of coordination between those departments to make sure that whomever is putting the plans in is meeting those codes. So these departments work together to define it and also prepared it for adoption. And that's what we saw that was done pretty well in Routt County. So requirements and features. As I mentioned, the wildland urban interface, that's the focus of this, of the code. You will see throughout the state, there is a state map and local maps that define the WUI and also the risk. So you'll see class 1 and class 2. Class 1, you can imagine probably downtown Denver would be a class 1. Lower risk has some requirements, but not as many as class 2. And class 2, that would be anyone or any community that has a moderate to higher risk. So that's based on the vegetation, the slopes, how close buildings are to the wildland urban interface. And this requires a lot more measures to reduce fire risk. In all of these cases, we talk about defensible space, and that's a term that we use a lot in the wildfire mitigation world. So that's 0 to 100 feet from your home. And it has very specific landscaping requirements, vegetation requirements, because that's really, when we think about wildfire risk and going from home to home, in many cases, it's not the actual flame, but embers, because embers can travel a very long distance. And so by having this defensible space, it doesn't matter if the fire is a half a mile or a quarter mile away, it reduces that wildfire risk or that risk to your home. So as I mentioned, the applicability, so it's any new build or any new residential or commercial, as well as any addition or renovation that increases the footprint or is replacing 25% of your external wall or roof. So there are some exemptions in the ag space, but I'm not going to go into that. That's like way in the weeds. But just think about pretty much as you think about new builds and remodels for residential and commercial. And as we talk about waste, there's some things that really only apply to new and some things that apply to both new and remodels. And I'll get into that. Okay, so this is where I'm not going into all the different requirements and fire resistance. I just want to really talk very high level about possible waste stream changes that we'll see. And this specifically, I mentioned sometimes it's new build and sometimes it's remodel. In a new build, the construction material, it's new. So we're not getting there's no waste associated with it. But for remodels, this is what you'll see. These are potential materials that we will see change. And so an increase in waste. So roofing, exterior wall assemblies, eaves and soffits, flashing, decking, glazing, doors, and fencing. So a lot of times what we've seen in these older homes, you have a lot of wood that is a fire risk in these different construction materials. And so there's much stronger requirements with this wildfire resilience code. So the organics, this is both new that we'll see an increase in waste in organics for both new and remodels. This is a graphic we use a lot in the wildfire resilience space. When we think about that, I talked about that 0 to 100. Within that, there are 3 different zones. There's the 0 to 5 feet. And with these new codes and best practices for mitigation, there should be nothing flammable. So that means like gravel instead of plants. You wouldn't have wooden decking. You wouldn't have wood up against your home. That's the 0 to 5 feet. 5 to 30, this is a transition. Still, fuels are reduced. And you're looking at vegetation that's low fuel or low fire risk. And finally, that 30 to 100 feet, you can have trees, but they should be pruned so they're not close to the roof or the house. So those are when we think about these home ignition zone or wildfire mitigation zones, that's what we think about these 3 zones. So as it relates to the code, they've used that same zone structure. So 0 to 5, hard landscape material only. There can be some vegetation. A list was created by the Colorado State Forest Service. That's in here, that acronym CSFS. They have a non-combustible vegetation list that can be used, but all shrubs, woody mulch, vegetation must be removed. If there are mature trees within that space, they do require pruning, so they're not anywhere close to the roof. Within the 5 to 30 space, removal of vegetation, and again, spacing to prevent structural ignition. So you don't want bush to roof. That's what that is talking to. And then, of course, no wood piles, no slash, no dead vegetation, and of course, no mulch. And then finally, in the 30 to 100-foot zone, it's tree pruning. So there isn't risk of ashes going from a tree to the roof or against the building. Okay, I went to a presentation that was 2 hours on the code, so I tried to get it into a very short presentation, really highlighting those potential waste sources, streams that we might see. But if you want to dig into this more, an outline of both local resources and state resources that will help anyone better understand the new code. And I always want to say how amazing and wonderful our Colorado State Forest Service folks are. There are local districts, both in the Front Range and in the mountains, and I think on the Eastern Plains. So they are an amazing resource on vegetation, wildfire risk, and they know this code. Your local district would know the code that is adopted in your area and can help with that as well. So that is what I have. I will stop sharing. And I don't know, Ben, I look to you, whether we want to talk about that a little bit or if you want to keep going through presentations.
Yeah, we will open the floor for 2 to 3 questions if anybody has any initially. As a quick reminder to the group, those resources that Sarah shared at the end of her presentation will be made available via the notes shortly following this meeting. So no worries if anybody missed those. So we'll share the deck as well as those resources within the notes. But yeah, now's a great time. If anybody has any quick questions about the Wildfire Resilience Code, please take a moment to ask them now before we dive into some of the subsequent impacts of this new code.
And I was going to say, Scott might have some things he wants to say too.
Yeah, thanks, Sarah, for a great presentation. And Sarah asked me to join and maybe to interject or to add some thought. And I guess what I see, there's definitely C&D diversion opportunities, organics diversion opportunities, but I also see some capacity needs. In Routt County, we have some capacity to help handle, this increase that we expect to happen, but definitely not sufficient capacity in all areas. We have a composting operation similar. I saw Julie on this call to Salida that takes food waste, the landfill, compost biosolids, and certainly they need wood chips. So I expect we'll have a healthy supply of wood chips, but we might have an overabundance as well. We've made some strides here in Routt County to try to handle C&D waste. We're still in that process, collecting information, and so certainly we don't really have the capacity necessary at this point, but definitely see the opportunity. And then I think this is also a good opportunity with wildfires that we expect to have a lot of activity for some messaging. And it's always good to try to get messaging out when things like this are at the forefront of people's minds. And so lots of opportunities, some challenges ahead for sure, some capacity, but definitely a need for some additional capacity.
Thanks, Scott.
We'll open the floor to some questions if anybody has any.
I was going to ask, and maybe this is the next presentation, because I saw Alicia hop on, but wondering if Scott or Alicia want to talk about the branch collection events and some of the things that y'all are doing to collect this material. Maybe that's the next presentation.
We'll get
Um,
to that.
yeah,
We have some detail on that, Sarah.
but Rachel, I think you bring up a good point because I mean the code is bringing this like, oh, it's a new code. We've got to be thinking about this. But our communities, and I know there's going to be several presentations on this, our communities are already doing wildfire mitigation, and there's already these sources of organics that need to be addressed before even there's enforcement of the code. So that's just best practice and happening now.
All right, 30 seconds is enough silence for me. Sarah, Scott, thank you so very much for overviewing that for us. And so now I'm going to take a moment to dive into some of the work that we've done here in Routt County. Um, I'm going to share my screen. I do want to make everyone aware my Wi-Fi has been a little bit spotty. So if for whatever reason I kind of phase out, Anne Marie Kirkpatrick from CSU is going to take over and lead that presentation. So I'm going to take a moment to share my screen, so bear with me. Then it's coming up. Here we go. All right, is everybody able to see that? Wonderful. Okay, well, I'm going to kick us off. So, last summer, summer of 2025, we really took some time to dive into biomass utilization. We were familiar that there was a bunch of wildfire mitigation work happening in Routt County. And so, with that, we had a couple conversations that led us to do a pretty in-depth biomass utilization study. This conversation really started when the ski area, the city of Steamboat Springs, the Routt County Wildfire Mitigation Council, and the Colorado State Forest Service came together to discuss the opportunity that biochar presented. The ski area in specific was really focused on, managing some of the biomass coming out of our management practices, as well as to better utilize some of the lop and scatter that had previously been done at the resort. And with that in mind, we were really exploring opportunities with the burn boss and the char boss that are coming out of some studies with the Colorado and U.S. State Forest Services. And so I actually met Alicia Archibald for just a quick meeting and mentioned that this was something we were exploring, and this is something that she mentioned was also on the radar of the state park, the city park and rec department, as well as the fire and rescue department. And with that in mind, we decided to hold some meetings to determine if that was something that we could come together on and work on together. For those unfamiliar, biochar is a carbon product that's made when wood is burned anaerobically and with low oxygen. And so we I said anaerobic, anoxically, sorry. And with that in mind, we really saw an opportunity to not only manage wildfire fuels and get some of those fuels out of our forests, but we also saw an opportunity to do some soil amendment around the community. And so with that all in mind, we came together and started discussing volumes and streams and how we could, work together to put together grants to create the funding to purchase something that we could produce biochar with. And with that all in mind, we really went back and forth long enough to decide we need somebody to study this. And to put together a full kind of forward plan that we could utilize to start engaging with other organizations and other municipalities in the area. And so with that all in mind, we outlined that we would bring in a Colorado State University Impact Fellow from their Sustainability MBA program. And with that all put together, we ended up bringing in Anne Marie Kirkpatrick, who is on the call today and is going to lead us through this presentation. And so she really spent some time with all of our organizations and then a massive amount of other organizations trying to understand what the problem was, what the challenges are, and how we could utilize those waste streams to help the county identify some ways forward. So with that, I will pass it over to Anne Marie.
Thank you, Ben, for that introduction. So as Ben mentioned, I was on a timeline from May to August. And you can, yep, there we go. So I spent the first part of this project just kind of gathering all the key players and stakeholders and who might be involved in different waste streams, and then try and really understand, given the scope of what we were trying to accomplish, what the real problem was and how to address it. So the beginning of my project was just a lot of meetings and interviews and gathering information and trying to determine the best path forward. And I guess, Ben, I maybe won't go through this exactly, but do you want to skip to the project overview before we do the problem? Because so that, yeah, I should have put this in a different order, but so this was kind of the task that we were looking at, is to develop a comprehensive woody biomass strategy for Routt County, managing the liability biomass, and then support the goals of wildfire mitigation, climate resilience, and as Ben mentioned with the biochar, strengthening the capacity of natural systems to store carbon. So after speaking with stakeholders and people involved in, the chief of the fire chief, arborists in the area, sawmill owners, and then all of the partners involved in like Colorado State Forest Service and Routt County Wildfire Mitigation Council that Ben mentioned, what we really came down to looking at as the problem we were trying to solve, if you want to go back to that slide, is just sort of what we narrowed down with Sarah's presentation, that there is, wildfire will happen. It's not if, it's when. And we wanted to decrease the volume of liability biomass, increase the forest health, and come up with a really coordinated, community-supported strategy for safe disposal and beneficial reuse. So with that in mind, our kind of working group came together to identify some goals for the project, reducing catastrophic wildfires, looking at like built infrastructure, the cities and towns in the area, protecting residents and visitors, identifying beneficial uses for the excess liability biomass, reducing carbon emissions, and then diverting organic waste from the landfill. These are some really lofty goals that there has been work done before I even came on this project, and work done happening now. So I'm confident that we'll get to this, but it's a tricky problem to solve. So some of the needs that we identified to achieve these goals are scalability, systems, site facility and workforce capacity. And then this isn't on here, but I think it's been mentioned a few times already, just the communication needed to kind of engage everyone and make sure that this is a process that moves forward and everybody is on board. One of the things I felt like in talking with all of the players, and even just community members, because we're looking at, right, Sarah was presenting on the different zones. Each household in the cities and towns have to be on board with this. So there's a large amount of engagement and understanding that has to happen as well. So then in looking at these needs, I tried to categorize the different types of biomass and identified, so the top portion of these products from the forest are marketable. We kind of identified these as there's a market for them, a sustainability that can, they don't need to be, I guess, accounted for in our plan because we didn't see these as being liabilities. There's a sustainable market for them. So we really narrowed it down a little bit more to what is the liability biomass that we're talking about. And this was slash and bushy material, lawn clippings and leaves, and then logs less than 4 inch in diameter. This is all kind of going back to like if we're asking community members to follow these zones, what are they going to do with the biomass that they accumulate? And then construction lumber as the fourth one. And then another big source of biomass is just the sawmills in the area. I spoke with each one of these and visited several of the sawmills, and they're largely just stacking their liability biomass on site. So they have piles and piles of wood chips and clippings. And there was in Kremlin for a little bit a biomass facility, biomass heating facility. That was a resource for them to bring those to, but it's just it's not cost effective for them to try and get rid of it at the moment. And so this presents a huge fire hazard with the accumulation of biomass that they have on site. And then there, in my final presentation, there are tons and tons of spreadsheets, and we went through a pretty deep analysis and looked into biochar quite a bit too. But my final recommendations after going through this process were to increase the chipping events that Steamboat currently puts on at different sites, and then pairing these with outreach and engagement opportunities. So it's not just a chipping event where people are coming to drop off their biomass, but they're also learning about what we're trying to do to get to some next steps to really make this a system that works. And then in conjunction with these chipping events, there was strong interest from the local waste hauler to come up with a yard waste collection program that was financially feasible for Routt County. And combining this with the building of an organics composting facility, along with the education and outreach, really helps kind of like close that gap in prepping homes to be resilient to wildfires. And I know I'm kind of going through this fast. I can't remember how much time you said I had, Ben,
You're
but
doing fantastic. Thank you.
okay, good. And then the third option was a biomass heating facility. And this, the reason for this recommendation was just there is definitely a volume coming from sawmills primarily to support this. And an industrial size facility didn't seem to make sense. So I had put on here for this biomass heating facility, possibly owned and operated by Steamboat as just a smaller facility that would be optimal to support the volume coming out of those. That's why the resource mentioned. Let's see. I think that's all I have as far as the work that went into it. I know I skipped a lot, but people can ask questions if they'd like to. So Ben, maybe I'll pass it back to you now to kind of wrap up next steps.
Of course. And some of the things that came out of this study are already being engaged in, and I will jump into those in a moment. But I also wanted to touch on why biochar sort of fell off of our list of opportunities for the region. Biochar in specific, takes a long time to produce and is produced in pretty low volumes. And with some of the outreach and additional data gathering that Anne Marie did, we really identified that there was, maybe more significant volumes around than what would be able to be managed successfully is over. And so with all of those things in mind, we ultimately decided that there were some other areas to pursue that were easier for us to engage the community with and be able to then subsequently, use that end product as either something that the ski area could use and or that could be used as a soil amendment, i.e. the composting facility. And so with that all in mind, what has happened since? So the next steps of the program were really to continue to define leadership and partnerships within there, as well as to secure sustainable funding. There's a lot of conversation both at the state level and federally about wildfire and about managing forest fuels. And so with that in mind, there's a bunch of grant opportunities available that we explored. So if anybody is interested in hearing about that, feel free to ask Anne Marie. We also were looking to address some regulatory needs and then really working to engage and inform the community. And so what's happening now is we have continued to expand the chipping events within the community. We're hoping one of Anne Marie's recommendations coming out of that was to move the chipping events around the community to gain easier access for the for community members. And so this upcoming one, we have an upcoming chipping event on May 15th that will be over on the kind of southeastern end of Steamboat Springs at the ski area's Meadows Park. And that really aims to, engage some of the folks that are in South Routt County in a way that when you run these chipping events at the landfill, which are in West Steamboat, and or somewhere in this town of Steamboat Springs, you sort of start to limit where people are coming from, and so. Some of those recommendations were to expand those chipping events as well as to move those around. And so that is something that the city of Steamboat Springs took into account and is currently engaging in really heavily. And then finally, another one of the recommendations, as mentioned earlier, was to engage the community, in particular around curbside pickup of organic. Organic collections, as well as, kind of what their willingness is for for additional costs attributed with that. And so that is something that we continue to look to understand and is a direct result of this study done by Anne Marie. And so with that, I will transition over to a question and answer period if anybody has any. This study was really intended to make us aware of all of the volumes and all of the opportunities for utilizing biomass. And so there's a lot that we did not go over in this presentation to keep things short. So feel free to ask any of those questions.
I have a question. Oh, really? Hi, Jennifer Richardson, Mesa County Solid Waste. Um, I was wondering Anne, if your study is available, if that's something that you are willing and able to share with attendants or me.
Yeah, definitely. There was a entire, oh, and Ben, maybe you can speak to this too. I think we still have a big shared drive with all of the data that I pulled and documentation and the spreadsheets just kind of outlining all of the different avenues that we explored.
Yeah,
Yeah, I'd be
I would
happy to
be.
go ahead, Jen. Sorry.
No, that's good. Yeah, if you could send that to me, Ben, that would be great. I would be really happy to look at that and it sounds like from that report I can get a feel for what other communities are identifying as sources and some avenues that she looked at for management. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's absolutely right. So we'll
Okay.
circulate that as well to make sure that everybody can get a moment to read through that. And then there's much more supplemental data that is, used to support that. And so I'll look at what avenues we can use to make that available as well.
Yeah, awesome. That's great. I think it's interesting that you identified sawmills because we're doing, something similar and I mean, not nearly different, but in the same vein. And we found that sawmills have, even in Mesa County too, right, have these enormous stockpiles of, and they're just like, take it. We don't know what to do with it. It's just sitting here.
Awesome. Well, are there any other questions? Otherwise, we will transition over to Rachel, who's going to talk a little bit about a subsequent part of all this use, which is using local mulch and compost.
I just have a jump in, Jennifer. You just got off camera. I'm sure Mesa County already is doing this, but have you talked to Delta Compost to see if they would take that? Because I know they have a pretty nice stockpile now of carbon, but I'm sure they would take more.
No, I have not talked to. I just found out in the
Yeah.
last week that they have this enormous stockpile. That's just that they don't know what to do with. But I'm sure transportation is always the hurdle, right?
Yes, but Delta did just get a walking trailer through a grant with C3E. So I bet at least for obviously fuel's expensive, and even more expensive now. But I know that they have the equipment to take a large load. So that might be something that y'all could connect with.
Yeah, great. Thank you.
And
Great
this is Alicia.
discussion.
I just wanted to jump in real quick. And one more thing that we're doing this year, aside from the chipping event in May, is we will also be promoting a program that Apex, the owner of the Milner landfill, and at the Milner landfill, they have a compost pad and an organics area, an organics drop-off area that they're going to, after me working with them, thinking, how can we get some more material diverted after this chipping event throughout the summer? And so they've agreed to offer a fourth Friday half price for the drop off of organics at their compost pad. So we're going to use that as an opportunity to get a better understanding also of, do people take advantage of opportunities when they have a lesser cost to, divert organics, or does it need to be curbside, or does it need to be an event? So every opportunity we can get to just see different ways that people will respond to help, again, with this reduction in biomass and working towards mitigation of wildfire.
And one
Thanks,
thing
Alicia.
I wanted to add on to that is, we're seeing, we've talked in the past about opportunities. Wildfire mitigation, actually, there's quite a bit of money out there. So if there are opportunities for either composting or some kind of waste diversion to work, fire departments, we actually have a wildfire council. Some communities have wildfire councils. Connect with them, because there are opportunities to do this granting where you have multiple users for, say, chipping or equipment or even funding. So I would say, if you have there is a wildfire council in your community, reach out to them. If there's a state forest service in your community, reach out to them, because there are so many good collaborative opportunities to fund this work.
Ready for me to dive in, Ben?
Yeah,
All
go on
right.
in.
All right. I am going to share a link to a tool I'm going to be talking about. So we've really been focused on the wildfire mitigation, but I also want to point out, I think we've talked about this in this group before, that Routt County has done, Ben, correct me, I'm going to get the title wrong, the climate action plan. Is that
Yeah.
okay?
Routt County Climate Action Plan.
Cool. All right, with a whole bunch of different bullets. Sarah teed it up well, some of them being economic opportunities from climate action. And so as we're talking about composting, we always want to remember that that is not necessarily a get rid of waste burden thing, but it's an opportunity as well. So EcoCycle was really excited to get a grant last summer to work with a couple communities on policy that would drive organics diversion. And so I got to work with Alicia and with Alicia, who's in Steamboat. Y'all didn't catch that. And with Kira, who is in the town of Eagle, to develop a policy. I'm going to give a shout out to the NRDC, because we used a model policy that they had for local compost use. And we tailored that policy to be a local compost and mulch, bulk compost and mulch use policy at the municipal level. So we did this for a number of reasons. Obviously we're trying to find outputs for the material that we're talking about, all this wildfire mitigation, and so how to create end uses for that will provide a steady stream for the businesses or government programs that are creating this material. We also wanted to codify the usage of these products. We know a lot of communities are already using these materials in their local parks and local green spaces, but sometimes that's dependent on one person who's the head of the parks department or something, knowing that that's a good way to do it. They move on, and then maybe the next person starts buying bagged mulch from Home Depot or Lowe's or wherever. So we wanted to find a way to codify that usage. We also know from talking to a lot of communities that are using this, I'm saying bulk. What I mean by that is loads of unbagged mulch and compost. That a lot of communities doing that are saving money. They don't have the waste of the bags to get rid of. They also are getting better prices because they're getting a load from, sorry, Jennifer Richardson is like on my screen right here. So from her facility or from Bill's facility, they're getting a whole truckload rather than having to go and get individual bags. That's also reducing the labor cost of opening up those bags to then spread the materials. So there's a lot of benefit to using these materials. And I want to point out, as we're talking about wildfire mitigation, and people might be saying, hey, how can you be using wood mulch if you're trying to reduce wildfire issues? You can absolutely do it. There are guidelines within that wildfire code. As Sarah said, check your local guidelines. They might be slightly different than the state code, but as long as you're keeping that, for the most part, again, check your local, but for the most part, if you're keeping that wood mulch 5 feet away from building structures, it's totally fine to do. And it's actually retaining moisture in the soil. So it can actually help prevent a wildfire from that perspective. Not data driven, but as an anecdote, as Sarah mentioned, I could talk about wildfire. After the Marshall Fire, we found embers in our mulch bed in our front yard, and it hadn't caught our mulch on fire. So, take that for what it's worth, but it's not like you have wood mulch on the ground and it's automatically going to light. So that's why we did this particular tool. The two things that we were able to develop were, one, the actual policy, and working with 2 different towns. They were looking at adopting it potentially 2 different ways. Alicia thought that possibly in Steamboat, the easier path to adoption might be as a procurement policy. So not going through city council, simply going through city staff. Whereas Kira thought, oh, we've got a city council who is really interested in composting, so we would like it as more of an ordinance model. So we were able to develop the same type of policy 2 different ways. I know you're all dying to know. Neither of them have yet adopted it, but they are working, and they both mentioned the term long game, trying to get this policy adopted. I'm happy to share the language with anyone. Since it was funded through a grant, I would love to have you reach out to me directly so that I can tell our funder, hey, we've got these other communities that are interested. Go ahead and email me, rachel@ecocycle.org, and I'm happy to share the information with you. The other piece of the tool that we put together, that's when I put the link in the chat, and happy to share it afterward as well, was a model tool kit so that Alicia and Kira could take it to their colleagues or to their elected officials and say, compost and mulch, it's happening in Colorado. Here are communities, here are businesses that are diverting this material. Here's there's a page in there that talks about the benefits of using compost and mulch on soils to rebuild health, to the economic benefits. So lots of different benefits in there. There's guidance in the tool about how to actually apply compost and mulch. And actually the mulch section is taken from the city of Louisville after the Marshall Fire. So it's in there. We still use mulch residentially and as a city. So there's that piece in there. One of the things I was really excited to develop, I don't see Clinton on here, maybe he is, but a number of the composters in the state helped us develop a set of questions that a community procurement department should ask if they are looking to purchase mulch or compost. So the information that a community should provide to local sources for that material, as well as questions they should ask. So that tool, happy for folks to use to really build out more of the use of local unbagged mulch, and compost. Happy to answer questions if folks have any. And a huge thank you to all of you on the call who provided photos or information for that toolkit.
Well, definitely check that toolkit out. For those that have been with us over the last couple meetings, you know that we did a huge focus on compost and municipal composting facilities in January, and have talked a little bit about organics over the last couple minutes as well. But one thing that Sarah mentioned coming out of the wildfire code is also construction and deconstruction impacts. And so with that, we wanted to take a moment to have Emily Freeman highlight the Construction and Deconstruction Council and some of the toolkits that their organization has coming out of this construction and deconstruction and as we approach these new wildfire codes. So with that, I'll pass it over to Emily Freeman.
Hi, everyone. I'm Emily Freeman. I'm with the City of Boulder, and thanks for having me on today. Oftentimes when we're talking about building materials, we are not thinking about how that plays into forest health and protecting the resources that go into the buildings we not only live but also work in as well. So one of the things that is, and I don't have a presentation, I'm just going to chat with you, but I am going to show you a flyer that Elizabeth Richardson has been working on for us. But one of the things that we oftentimes don't think about is the amount of lumber that goes into our homes. And just as a quick overview, they say it takes about 50 to 60 virgin trees to build a 1,500 square foot home. That is also the equivalent of clear cutting about 1.5 acres of forest land for each 1,500 square foot home. And I also challenge you to think about how many homes these days are 1,500 square feet. Most are not. Most are a lot larger, especially in new communities where those homes are going up. So one of the things that we think about when it comes to deconstruction is how can we protect the materials that have already been harvested or produced and manufactured that are in our buildings, because it's not just how we treat those at the end of life, but this lumber does play, like, it's how can we try to allow for the reuse of those materials, and that's been the focus of our salvaged lumber subcommittee as part of our C&D council. You may remember back to the 2025 summit, we were talking about pursuing some potential legislation around mandating, mandating is not the right word, sorry, but around providing the guidance to allow for the reuse of lumber. And seriously, I should never have said mandating, because it was never that. It basically is, we want to be able to outline how lumber, both graded and ungraded, could be used. And the models for that were coming out of Oregon and Washington. The difference that we have in Colorado is that we do not have a statewide building code. And with not having statewide building code, and being a home rule state, each municipality and county adopt different versions of that. So we're all at different stages of what is allowed. But one of the things that we found out through our research is that even whether, I think it might be Steamboat, I think you guys are on 2017, but it might also be Aspen as well. Or if you're Denver on 21, or Boulder in the 2024 building code, what is allowed is the reuse of materials, and for lumber when it is stamped. When we're looking at places that do have the capacity to salvage and store that salvage lumber, maybe only 20% of that lumber is stamped. So it is important for us to not only provide guidance to building code officials who might be doing inspections, and building code inspectors during those framing inspections, say what can we look for, and how can we educate that these are allowable uses so that home builders, architects, developers are not encountering roadblocks when trying to incorporate salvage lumber. So that's really been our focus. And even though we're not pursuing this statewide like legislation to provide that guidance, and we were never planning to mandate the use of that material, we just wanted to make sure people understood how to do that. We didn't have the right pathway in Colorado. So what we're focusing on is the outreach and education. So our C&D salvage lumber team has been working to not only provide guidance, which you may have seen if you attended Lobby Day. So we produced our first initial flyer on that. In the more recent months, we have been interviewing our chief building officials around the different cities and counties that we live in to get a better understanding of the landscape around their familiarity with the reuse and incorporation of salvage material, not only lumber, but primarily lumber, into new construction, and to understand where they are at with their codes. So I want Elizabeth, I think Elizabeth might be on the call, but if she's not, I'm going to give you a quick preview of the informational flyer that Elizabeth has worked on in Canva for us. So our idea is that we are going to be able to share this flyer with building officials across the state and educate them around what is the current problem, what is our opportunity that is allowed and is consistently allowed under different iterations of that building code. So we wanted to meet people where they're at and provide guidance around how to use this in their community. And again, we want people to be educated around what is available for use and how to use it under current code. Not saying people need to go out and start salvageware yards, but I love it. But we just want to say, if you're able to create a supply, this is how we can help educate so the demand side can then start responding. So I just wanted to kind of share that this has been our approaches around education and outreach. We are also hoping to reach out to home builders associations to help spread that word as well. So not just the building code official, but how can we get those home builders on board and say, these are resources and how to use this. So I'm going to give you a quick, our future. We are looking to potentially pursue C3 funding to create a video. Some of the chief building officials told us that if we not just have a stagnant flyer, but if we can show what deconstruction is, how to there are actual places that do capture the lumber and show the end product. If we can create a short video around how to get the lumber and how to use the lumber, that might be more beneficial. We think that it would be a good match for C3 because this is across Colorado, and we would be able to encourage all municipalities and counties and to adopt this. It would not be branded for any specific cities. So I just wanted to state that that's kind of where we're at and where we're going. I also want to give you an update that I got on I gotta find it on my texts because we're on text basis, but we have been working on updating the 2027 international building code. So this lady, Garian Sika, she is with the city of Eugene in Oregon. She and I have been working together to get the International Code Council to formally acknowledge salvage lumber as a defined building material. and then set the criteria that would allow for graded and ungraded lumber to be incorporated into buildings for both structural and non-structural purposes. And it outlines how to do that. This would be an update to the 2027 code. If that does get the final approval, we would work to also educate the cities and counties and just say, hopefully, when you're ready to adopt this, this is what that change means, and encourage them to vote yes for that. So I just wanted to let you know that there was an in-person meeting in Connecticut last week on Earth Day, but it was a multiple day event, and the language that was proposed was overall accepted. They want a few minor edits to that. I'm not going to bore you with all those technicalities, but I wanted to share that as long as local governments, the chief building officials, vote yes for this in May, salvage lumber will be in the 2027 International Building and Residential Codes. So this is a huge win for us, and the direction that allows us to not mandate or change code or go through that legislative process, but it allows us to set that guidance and tone so that building code, which is what our permitting and building departments already are familiar with, it allows them to incorporate it in a very welcoming and digestible way. I also want to mention, I'm going to try and get all of these acronyms right because they're just acronyms on my text, but so we received full testimonial support from AIA, American Institute of Architects. I think NCSEA is, I think it's National Council of Structural Engineers, maybe association. Sorry, you're gonna have to check me on this. NAHB is the National Association of Home Builders. AWC is the American Wood Council, and the ALSC is I think it's American Lumber Standards Coalition. I think I got those all right. And all of those national trade organizations are going to be able to help us with the education and outreach of this for free. So really proud of the efforts that we are doing on a national level, because it's something that we can bring directly to Colorado to benefit us. It's great to have that national coalition of support. I guess I have one ask, and I'll send this to the Greater Colorado Council, but the more word that we can get out, and once I have that language of what to ask your chief building officials to vote yes to incorporate that salvage lumber, but I'll be able to provide you with kind of a set language, copy, paste, modify a little bit here and there, and just say, look, this isn't mandating anything. We're just really trying to legitimize this. We have the support of all these trade council or trade associations. We really encourage you to do this because it will benefit not only buildings and reuse and circularity, but it benefits our forests and it benefits like full organic health. So yeah, that's our update on what we're doing in regards to salvage lumber for Colorado.
That was wonderful, Emily. Thank you so much. Can you remind the group when the next C&D council meeting might be?
Well,
Or
our
throw it
next
in the
salvage
chat when you
lumber
can.
meeting is
Oh, or
at
that.
2 p.m.
Oh.
today. So 2 p.m. today, and then our next C&D council meeting, we just had one on April 15th. So we meet quarterly. So I think we're in July 15th from 2:30 to 4 p.m.
Wonderful. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Well, now we have spoken a bit about composting. We've spoken a bit about C&D waste. And so we're going to finish up with a brief update from Jennifer Richardson about a biochar workshop that they're running in Grand Junction.
Hi, everybody. Good. Thank you. this is really, it really is just brief. I am not the biochar expert by any means, but I did want to let everyone know that if the conversation today has got you interested or are thinking about biochar or thinking about solutions for wood debris and what are we supposed to do with all of this um, waste that, is compostable, but composting takes a really long time um, and you have to have the right carbon to nitrogen ratio. Anyway, we are hosting a biochar workshop on May 12th and 13th here in Grand Junction. It is a full day, 2-day training designed to be practical. There will be some classroom instruction, but then there's also going to be some like hands-on in the field work that we're going to be doing so that you can take this knowledge back to wherever you are and hopefully apply it to the work that you are doing in your areas. Um, in the morning, like I said, we're going to be focused on the fundamentals, what is biochar, why it matters, how it can improve soil health, water retention, and just overall resilience. Then in the afternoons, we're going to move outside and put the knowledge into practice, producing biochar, not just hearing about it. So if you decide to join the workshop, be prepared to work, right? We have a really strong lineup of instructors. So like I said, I am not the expert. I'm just the host site here in Grand Junction, for those of you guys who don't know. But our instructors, we have Dr. Ricardo Vasquez Perales. He's a professor at Western State University. He has done a lot of research around biochar and regenerative ag. And he is really trying to take this work and translate it into real world applications. Speaking of real world application, we have Sam Bennett, who is another instructor. He's a founder of Gardens of Fire. He produces biochar on a farm scale and really focuses on making it accessible to farmers. And then we are also going to be joined with by Kelpie Wilson. She is the author of the Biochar Handbook. A leader in the field. She is known for developing the Ring of Fire kiln system, which is the system that we're going to be using. It's a portable kiln that you should be able to use it on your land at a small scale again, right? So rare chance to learn from people who are both leading the research and also actively doing the work. There is a registration fee of $80 for the 2 days. We do have a small number of scholarships available, so if you really want to attend, but you can't really swing that $80, we have some scholarships. The only thing that we're asking of the scholarship recipients is that they help us on a third day in the morning to just kind of finish up and clean up and tear down anything that we weren't able to complete in the first 2 days. This biochar we're doing the workshop and we're creating the biochar, but really it's part of a bigger project. We partnered with a grad student from Western State University. And once we create this biochar, we're going to be putting it into our composting feedstock and composting it and seeing how compost and biochar can work together to support that composting process. So it's really part of a bigger project. And so that's why we ask that if you are a scholarship recipient, that you help us on that last day, just to make sure that we're actually ready to do the next phase, which is incorporating into our compost. So I am going to put the link to sign up in the chat. If you're like right now interested, you can click on it and do that. But if maybe not, and you need some more time to think about it or something, please reach out to me. I'd be happy to share the flyer with you. And then you could send it out to anybody that you think might be interested. And then you will have the link in the flyer. So if you want the flyer, reach out to me. I put my email in the chat too. If you are just really excited and want to participate, you can click on the link that I already put in and you can sign up because we would be happy to have you join us. Is that okay? Yeah.
That was great.
All right.
Thank you so very much. Well, we've gone over a ton of different resources and links and flyers today, so keep an eye on the chat, but also know that most of this information, if not all, will be released through the notes at the end of this meeting and through a follow-up email. So if you miss anything, don't worry too much. We'll get it over to you. With that, we're going to transition away from the main part of our meeting and into our more regular parts of our meeting. And we're going to start with a policy update from the policy committee. Amelia, will you jump in on that?
Hi, team. I'm not sure quite what to update from the policy side. Rachel, did you want to pop in for that?
Happy to. Amelia represented our group at the last policy committee meeting at the beginning of the month. I think they talked about planning the policy retreat at the summit. Please, please, please all come and represent Greater Colorado so that we make sure that we have Greater Colorado voices at that policy retreat. I'm sure Allie can easily pop the registration link into the chat, please, so you can get there. There's been a ton going on. We have I think it's about 2 weeks left of the legislative session. Don't have links, but I'm going to put 3 bills in the chat. There have been a ton of recycling, organics related, pollinator related bills this legislative session, and I really do credit all the work that Recycle Colorado and Colorado Composting Council have done in the past decade or so of bringing our legislators up to interest in zero waste recycling composting topics. So the 3 that I put in here, the first one, SB 26-155, since we're talking building code, it is one that is going to create a system for a fund for folks needing to replace their roofs in their residences to get impact resistant roofs. At least for those of us on the foothills and plains, this is really important. It's going to really reduce hail related waste, so shingle related waste. And something very cool, shout out to those of you on the Front Range. I'm looking at a few of you, but I won't call you out by name. If your communities don't already have ordinances like Lafayette and Fort Collins do that require new and replaced roofs to be impact resistant, please look at those ordinances and adopt them, because this bill is going to prioritize communities that have those types of ordinances to get funding to residents there. So that is super huge. We're really excited about EcoCycle is really excited about that. I am speaking on behalf of EcoCycle, not Recycle Colorado today. Another one that I got an email as Sarah was talking has now passed the Senate, so it's on its way to the House, is SB 26-146. It is restrict single-use food serviceware distribution, also known as skip the stuff. This has been run a couple times in Colorado. A couple communities have passed similar ordinances. What this is going to do is it's going to build out the Plastic Pollution Reduction Act to include a ask first system for single-use items at restaurants. It does not ban a single thing. It just means if you go and you get your takeout, that instead of just shoving the ketchup packets in your bag, you either need to say, please give me ketchup, or the person giving it to you should say, would you like ketchup with that? So it's going to set a statewide baseline like Plastic Pollution Reduction Act. It'll be up to municipalities and counties to enforce. So those of you who are not in the city of Denver and already have such an ordinance in place, please look at this, and hopefully you can work on educating your local restaurants. And the biggest difference between the last time this was introduced and this time is that the bill sponsor and the teenagers who are running it, that's a big difference, have worked with the restaurant association. So the restaurant association is actually in a neutral position on it this time. Last time they were opposed. Megan, you have a question?
Yeah. Oh, well, just curious if with this bill and the way it's being introduced and presented, is there like some cost saving like numbers, like in data that they're sharing? Because that's the cool thing, right? Like those plastic spoons and those ketchup packets all have a cost. So this really would actually save money, which is, forget sustainability, it'll save money, which, speaks the language of some people. So
Good point. If anybody wants more on that, Upstream Solutions has a great toolkit, as does Denver's reuse study. Both of them showed that restaurants can save hundreds to thousands of dollars when they reduce single-use stuff. And there is zero fiscal note from the state perspective on that. So that's great. Another big bill that we've been following as Recycle Colorado is SB 26003, the EV battery producer responsibility bill. They have done a ton of work on this, working with vehicle manufacturers and recyclers, as well as pesky ENGOs and local governments. Again, I'm looking at some of you on this call to do another strike below tomorrow. So that means that the last version of the bill that was heard, they're completely throwing that out and introducing a new version that's got it's a really solid bill. It just they've done a ton of work to negotiate out a lot of issues that were in it and to make a really good bill. So that'll be an appropriations in the Senate tomorrow. Still needs to go through the Senate floor and then do the whole process in the House. But it was one of the legislature's top priority bills, so hopefully that'll make it through. As I said, there's a ton of bills. There's a couple cleanups on producer responsibility and on the battery bill from last year, like literal administrative, totally nerdy, wonky things, and other various things. But those are the really exciting ones. Emily.
Finding unmute. Can I share my screen with you guys real quick? It's related to Megan's question about the cost savings. So City of Boulder just worked with PACE to kind of start understanding what the potential impacts would be. So just wanted to share, like, this is the first time I've ever shown it to anybody, so bear with me. So this is, we did a reusable impacts analysis. This is our summary page. And
Emily,
we'll use, wait,
I don't, is everyone else seeing this? Oh, now it's starting to share.
Now it's
Okay,
starting.
now
Okay.
we're good.
All right, so there's a lot of information here, but I just wanted to kind of highlight this takeout upon extras request. It's down here at the bottom. And we ran it for only a couple different restaurant types, but the kind of things, as you scroll here, you have kind of like what the status quo is. So we were able to get some data on what are people currently using, what are their sizes, run all of this information through the EPA WARM model, and we were able to then calculate the potential costs and like not just environmental savings, but actual financials costs, which is what Megan was asking about. So this is just for City of Boulder. So this is what we project would be a total cost savings on an annual basis if people do a skip the stuff type action or bill. So not saying no, like, and we can also change the assumptions on percent adoption. So like those who like, maybe that's 100% are supposed to adopt, but only like 80% in actuality do. So it's just a rough draft of like where we're at, a model for us to be better informed, that kind of gives us like scenarios like here we're also like, we looked at reusable straws, and like reusable straws was a net negative 20,000 across all businesses. So and then what we tried to do is a per business breakdown in those columns. M&M, haha, sorry. Sounds weird when I say it. I just wanted to like share this as like there are models like through Denver, but I just also wanted to highlight like some more immediate work that we just did.
That's awesome. Thank you for sharing, Emily.
I think that was all I had from policy, so I'll pass it back to you, Ben.
Great. Does anybody else have any questions for Rachel or anyone else involving policy? Great. As we typically do, we're going to conclude with a quick update on EPR and how that is rolling out. And then we should have 5 minutes or so for any subsequent member updates if anybody has anything else to share with the group. So, Rachel Z, may I ask if you would just pop on and just give us any relevant EPR updates?
Yes, thank you for the opportunity. I really appreciate it, Ben,
Of
and
course.
everybody. Yeah, so we actually sent out a newsletter yesterday. If you've heard me talk before, you know I'm going to encourage you to sign up for it. I'll put it in the chat because a lot of this news is in there. But I think the exciting thing is that we continue to move from planning into real participation. And what that means is that the local government request for reimbursement is underway. The processing request for reimbursement is underway. There's processors in cities and communities and counties that are navigating these funding processes. So that's underway. The other big things to know is that I'll start with time bound. At 2 o'clock, right after this meeting, if you want to learn about compost, we are going to be hosting a webinar that will be recorded about compost facility funding. So even if you can't make it and you want to get an email with the recording, go ahead and register for it. I'll put links in the chat here in just a sec, because that way you'll get the email with the recording. The other webinar that we have coming up next week on May 6th is about education and outreach. So before we go public with our website, with the statewide campaign, we really want to let communities and everyone know what to expect, what kind of questions they might get from their residents, what they're going to see in terms of media that CAA, Circular Action Alliance, will be running. So those are two good webinars coming up. And then the other two big ones right now. I talked a little bit about this whole request for reimbursement thing, right? So there's multiple funding opportunities that are open, right? So composters can express interest on our website for compost facility funding right now. And then open market residential collectors or recycling haulers can have one more day to submit their interest form. So again, that newsletter really is the best way to stay in touch with funding opportunities as they open and close. Important thing to keep in mind is that if anybody missed these first rounds of funding, they're going to reopen later this year on a rolling basis. It's not like if you missed it, you're out. So do know that. So I'll go ahead and put some of those links in as promised, but happy to answer any questions. Thank you again for the opportunity.
Thank you so much, Rachel. Well, Ali, I think we can cut the recording there before we launch into our final few updates.